I'm levitating. You can fly away with me tonight. You can fly away with me tonight. Baby, let me take you for a ride.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 9th Annual Florida Automated Vehicle Summit hosted by the Central Florida Expressway Authority. Please welcome the Executive Director of CFX, Laura Kelly, and the legislator who puts it all together, Senator Jeff Brandes.
Good morning, everybody. It is great to see so many faces in person. Yes. Welcome to Orlando, and welcome to the 2021 Florida Automated Vehicle Summit. We have a packed and engaging couple of days planned for y'all. As most of you know, last year, the 2020 FFE Summit transitioned to a virtual speaker series. We are grateful for those who participated, both the speakers and the participants. That series showed the interest and importance of the conversations we will be continuing over the next couple of days. Let me say again, it is awesome to see you all. Each of you in the audience represent the diverse talents and professions that make up the ACES arena, from elected officials setting policies that are paving the way for innovation, to engineers and developers exhibiting the latest and greatest in automated technology, to students and transportation professionals. I don't know about you, but I feel very fortunate to be in the transportation business during this exciting time. Our industry is evolving very quickly. Each of us have a role in ushering in this new era where technology, innovation, and transportation systems are all colliding. You may have a hard time choosing between the sessions we have planned for the next 2 days, from examining who might win the self-driving car race and the pivot to electrification, to exploring the future of ACES with its far-reaching industry impacts from mobility to agriculture. We will be addressing today's top opportunities and today's top challenges. I am definitely not going to miss the demos and exhibits, and you all please don't miss them. They are extraordinary. I hope you will also take a moment to stop by the student poster displays out back. They are very impressive. I would like to thank Rose and Shingle Creek for hosting this year's summit, and to our transportation partners and help plan and organize this event. I would like to thank Senator Brandes for his vision and leadership that has positioned Florida as one of the front runners in the automated vehicle industry. He is truly the reason we are all here. Please join me in welcoming Senator Brandes.
Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to see you all here. This started many, many years ago. I was born and raised in St. Petersburg. I went to school, a little private school, where my mom was the elementary principal, my elementary principal, and then ultimately the headmaster of the school that I went to. I joined the Army 7 days after high school, mostly to get away from her. I spent 11 years in the military. I spent 2003, 2004 in the 101st, driving convoys throughout Iraq. And when I got back, I thought I was going to come back and work for my family, had a family business, which they promptly sold. And I took a couple years and decided, look, I wanted to get involved in politics in some way, shape, or form. And so I decided to run for the Florida House. Ran for the Florida House, won by just under 1,000 votes, was part of a really talented class of individuals that had to figure out what I really wanted to work on while I was in the Florida House. So I had this kind of idea that there's probably one big idea in every area of public policy, and I wanted to go find that big idea. But I needed to do it in a concentrated way. I needed to do it in a smaller format where I could do it pretty quickly and scroll through a bunch of ideas. So I went to the single best source of knowledge for young legislators, and I started watching TED Talks. And it was perfect because in the drive from St. Petersburg to Tallahassee is about 4 hours. And I could crush about 10, 15, 20 TED Talks in between that drive. And so I watched TED Talks over and over, probably 300 or 400, until I came across Sebastian Thrun's discussion on self-driving cars. And I knew that was a big idea that I wanted to be a part of. Not only because of what he had talked about how much safer it was going to be, how it was going to change our cities, the infrastructure around us. But I knew for my soldiers, it would have been a lot safer had we not had to be in those vehicles getting shot at and mortared in the IEDs on the road. And so it was immediately the big idea that I grasped onto. Now, when I went and pitched this idea to my internal team, and I said, hey, my legislative aide, I said, look, I really want to work on the future of transportation, and that includes self-driving cars. And he said, you're crazy. Nobody in the country is talking about self-driving cars. If you do a bill on self-driving cars, they'll laugh you out of the chamber. So I did what any good legislator always did and I got a new legislative aide who was not as good at talking me out of things. And so the next year we worked on self-driving cars. And that really is the genesis of this. We recognized that there was not a policy conversation in the state, frankly in the country, specifically focused on helping state leaders think bigger about the future of mobility and transportation. So what you're going to see today is the culmination of 9 years of experience of us bringing to you what we think are the best ideas from leaders from around the country, around the world. I think we have 5 states represented here, 5 countries represented here, 20 states, 600 attendees today, all with the common purpose of learning more about the future of transportation, to try to peer around the corner to see what's coming next. So I'm so excited today to have you here to talk a little bit about what the future holds as we walk together and see if we can peer around the corner. I'm also honored to introduce today our university partners. The future of transportation is not only what you're doing, but it's inspiring the leaders for tomorrow. And that's why our university partners are so important. Florida is recognized as having one of the best public university systems in the nation. And that continues with our conversation today. Dr. Atee is here with us today. He's the trustee and chair of the University of Central Florida. He's the Pegasus Distinguished Professor and chair of the Civil, Environmental, and Construction Engineering Department. He's leading the Future of City Initiative at UCF and introduced the first MS degree in smart cities. We're so honored to have Dr. Atee here. Dr. Atee, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Brandes. Laura, thank you very much for the introduction. I have a few minutes that I thought to introduce the work that we're doing at the University of Central Florida. And I believe all of you know where is the University of Central Florida, because every conference, nationally or internationally, I have to explain UCF and USF and UF and where each university is located. But we are right here in Central Florida. So we have one of the largest transportation groups, and allow me to, by no means I'm going to talk in detail about anything, but I'm just going to give you a flavor of some of the work and maybe we can continue the discussion later. So as the senator mentioned, we established about 3 years ago the Future City Initiative for research, education, training related to the future city or the smart city, not necessarily only transportation, but transportation is a big part of it. And part of this effort, we introduced the first master's degree in engineering in smart cities in the nation. It has been going on for a couple of years now, very successful, with a lot of students from multidisciplinary background that are taking this master's degree. Part of a federal highway grant led by the Florida DOT with partnership with the MPO Metro Plan Orlando and ourselves, we are converting East Orange into a truly smart transportation hub. Among the effort is 2 routes, 2 autonomous vehicle shuttle routes on campus. You can imagine that they are providing the last or the first mile to connect to the UCF shuttle service. So it is, and it's an ADA system, so we can also help the disabled to go around our campus. We have, I would say, the largest data warehouse. Any data you can imagine, we have it, and in real time. So all the sensors that you see around the roads, whether signals, ATSPM, whether microwave sensors, whether Bluetooth sensors, everything we have live, including also the CCTV cameras, and also we are getting into the private data also. So we have Wajo, we have Lytix, we have Lynx and UCF shuttles feed. We have all the data you can imagine, and with each and combination of data, fusion of data, we are doing a lot of applications in the technology area. About a couple of years ago, we won a US DOT challenge, Office of the Secretary. I had the honor to receive the prize from Secretary Chow. At that time, 54 teams, heavyweights entered this, and I'm happy that me and my students were able to win this challenge, and a couple of $100,000 award also, where we developed a system based on all the data that I talked about before. And basically what we are doing, and this is tested and validated, we are predicting accidents in real time 5 to 15 minutes before they happen. So imagine that you are able to tell, and this was validated in Central Florida, more than 800 crashes where the prediction was 82%. So in 82% of the cases, we said at least 5 minutes in advance, there will be a crash at this location if we don't do something about it. What can we do about it? There are so many ITS technologies, the connected vehicle technology. There are a lot that we can do to prevent and hopefully reduce even the severity of impending crashes. So this is a live system that has been working for 2 years. FDOT District 5 is in the process of using parts of this system. And you can get all the analytics about the location that we are predicting will be a hazardous location. This is all data. In the future, a connected vehicle can get this data, and we can give messages to the driver about, taking care or slowing down as they approach the hazardous location. So this is also implementable in a connected vehicle environment. We have produced 2 very sophisticated computer vision systems for safety applications. This is one of them that is using UAV or using drones to analyze the safety of any location that we choose using conflicts and near misses of crashes so we can quickly identify the problem and solve it. You know that the current practice in safety is that we wait and have crashes and then try to intervene, and this takes years and a high cost. We can do this in a matter of a couple of weeks now. Another system that we developed for roadside cameras, we are looking into low-cost roadside cameras. We are even tapping into the CCTVs if they are pointing at the right location in order to do analytics and prediction. For example, in this figure, you can see we are predicting the violations of pedestrians so that we can alert connected vehicles, and hopefully in the future we can even alert pedestrians. You can see here one of the applications of a connected vehicle, and you can see, for example, in a blind spot in a parking lot, we are able to identify in the vehicle, using the computer vision technology, there is a pedestrian dashing between the cars, so that we can also warn accordingly. I think, autonomous vehicles have a lot of sensors and cameras, but they might not be able to see everything around. Like if the vehicle is turning right, the vehicle cannot see, even if it's equipped with autonomous technology, but the cameras on the road can see other potential problems and send, using connected vehicles, this to the vehicle. So to increase even the safety of autonomous and automated vehicles. We are using a lot of existing technologies and resources, such as Google, for example, Google Maps, Google Images. And we are using this to build digital twins. So for example, in this picture, I cannot control it from here, but I was gonna show you the process of building a digital twin. We have built the campus digital twin so that we can test anything that we need, whether transportation or other. And you can see here, we are even driving the campus roads in simulation. So this is a combination of micro simulation, animation, multi-driving simulation, driving on the digital twin that we created for campus. So this is again related, which is allow us to test a lot of the connected and autonomous technologies in the lab. Pedestrian, as I mentioned, also detecting with the CCTV cameras the weather, the events, as if the 16,000 cameras that we have on the roads in Florida are 16,000 eyes, and the AI is the brain that is thinking about what is seeing continuously on the road and can give us a lot of information and alert us to a lot of what's going on. We have also developed an app to bring in pedestrians and also connected technology, I2V, as well as P2V, pedestrian to vehicle technology, because pedestrians, we need to connect them also with the transportation system. We need to alert pedestrians. For example, here we are predicting that this vehicle is going to turn right, and therefore we need to alert the pedestrian that the vehicle is coming your way, as well as the pedestrian, the vehicle that there is a pedestrian around the corner to cross the road. So smartphones could play a role also, and this is what we are doing. Our vision is to combine most of what I said in one system. The prediction, the cameras, and everything will have the platform that we built for USDOT to be able to do better with data and better with computer vision. And this, of course, the ultimate benefit is the connected and automated efforts that we are doing in our states. This is our vision for transportation at UCF, one of the highly ranked programs now in transportation technology in the nation and Florida. And this is what we are working on, from connectivity to better data to real-time interventions or proactive intervention for safety reasons, smart city research, etc. I think I exceeded a little bit the 7 minutes that I was allocated, but I thank you for being in Orlando and for being our guests here. Enjoy the meeting. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your speakers for the next session, the Chief Marketing Officer for Beep, Raquel Asa, and Carla Belo, President and CEO for the Center for Automotive Research.
Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute honor to be standing here today in front of all of you, the movers and shakers and innovators of Central Florida, around the country and around the world. It is my distinct honor to introduce Ms. Carla Belo, who joined us today for this fantastic session. And as I introduce her, just to give a little bit of a brief bio before she gives her presentation, I'm going to invite her to the stage. Ms. Carla Belo is the President and CEO for the Center for Automotive Research. She is the president and a leader in engineering and vehicle program management with 42 years of experience in the automotive industry. Under her leadership, CAR continues to be a pertinent resource of objective and unbiased research, analysis, and information regarding the North American automotive industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Carla Balow.
Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me okay? It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm kind of on a high from Saturday. I'm a big Michigan fan. I was in the stands. Go Blue. And a lot of people asked me afterwards, did you go on the field? Did you run on the field? I said, I really, really wanted to. I really wanted to, but I saw the people hopping back up, and I said, I don't think I can do that. So I better not get down there because it was darn cold and snowy. So instead, I walked to my car. I parked in the public parking at the library because it's cheap. And then I got in my car and I sat in it for 2 hours trying to go 4 miles to my home. And all I kept thinking was, there's gotta be a better way. That was ridiculous. Not only the amount of time that we all spent, but the carbon footprint that we were also producing at the same time. So today I'm going to talk a lot about sustainability, ESG, how that relates to electrification, and what's happening with the world of autonomy. Are we as far along as we said? I would tell you back in 2014-15, by this time we said we'd have 25% AVs on the roadway. We're not close. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. That means it's a good thing, because making autonomous vehicles work properly is darn difficult. So let me get started, and let me give you a warning about some of these slides. We're a research company. We often put a lot of words on slides. I'll share these with you. This first slide can be summed up very simply. Do the right thing. DTRT, sounds like Detroit. Do the right thing. Environmental, social, and governance. Environmental, care about your carbon footprint. Clean up the world, watch your supply chain, look at every element of your carbon footprint. Driven in part by the public themselves. And I think we're seeing a big push, especially looking at some of the Gen Zs and younger. They're looking at your company's sustainability motto, so to speak. They're choosing to work at companies because of what you're doing in the world of sustainability, how you're treating the environment, and how you're managing social issues. So the public is driving it. The other is the energy companies are cleaning up their act, which means that the carbon footprint that's being produced by the transportation industry has now become the largest source of carbon footprint. We also know that there's no better way to move people than with public transit. It's the most efficient way. So cleaning up our public transit products to emit less carbon makes a lot of sense. I'm going to talk a lot about the mobility ecosystem later, but I wanted to tee up a little bit about the public transit situation. And then when we talk about the social kicked off by Black Lives Matter, but it should have been kicked off long before that. As a female in the automotive industry, starting in 1978, the environment was not friendly. It was never very friendly. And now it's time that we all recognize that. We're seeing chief diversity officers being appointed and being put in the boardroom instead of in a separate office and being told, fix it and tell us what to do. The other is really thinking about transit and how to have mobility equity. And again, I'll talk about that in more detail. But let me give you a little fact. The average American today, their household income is $65,000. They can afford a vehicle that is 14 years old. That's what they can afford today. Electric vehicles today, nearly all of the buyers have household incomes of $100,000 plus. If we really want to tackle mobility equity and tackle cleaning up the environment at the same time, we need a lot of breakthroughs in terms of cost. We need a lot of breakthroughs in terms of ride sharing, other mobility services to provide equity for all. The other piece of ESG is governance. Are you managing your hotline properly? Are you managing your audit committees properly? All of this is under the microscope. So I think I've already talked about several of the words, and again, there's lots of words, and I apologize. I like to show pictures so you'll know which slides are mine and which slides I pilfered from other people in the company. But from an electrification or environmental viewpoint, we are seeing billions of dollars being invested by the auto companies every single day. More announcements than ever. Almost 100% of all the automotive announcements this year have been about electrification. We saw Nissan come to the table yesterday with an $18 billion plan to electrify over 50% of their fleet. Not only vehicles, but the manufacturing facilities and even your offices are under scrutiny for your carbon footprint. Lots of recycling. Looking at the entire value chain. So a lot of the suppliers now are asking, what do I need to do? Because the OEs are starting to make very direct plans, and as part of that, their entire supply chain is under scrutiny. There is a lot happening in the social. I mentioned a little bit about chief diversity officers. There's a lot of emphasis on inclusivity because so many companies, departments, organizations are exclusive and you don't even realize it. I did have the opportunity to work in academia for a while. In mechanical engineering, of which I am, very few professors are female or persons of color. And we were wondering, one of the questions was, why are women and persons of color choosing to go biomedical, chemical, all these other areas? And we looked at the faculty and said, because nobody looks like them here. They don't feel comfortable. You're being exclusive, you don't realize it. So always think about that. I'm saying I'm being inclusive, but am I really being exclusive? A lot of people really want to be involved in the community and give back to the community. That's all part of your social initiative. And this is a key to sustainability. People are going to come work for you if you show and demonstrate equity and social. So President Biden, thankfully, made his big announcement in the middle of CAR's management briefing seminars, which is our largest conference of the year. And he announced on August 5th that 50% of all vehicles by 2030 need to be electrified. The interesting thing is, the only vehicles included are pure battery electric, plug-in hybrids, and fuel cells. So mild hybrids, full hybrids are all excluded. So companies like Toyota, for example, that are really banking on hybrids as a walkway to battery electric vehicles had to rethink or had to begin to think about their policy. Now, it is non-binding, but the automakers are making big investments. They're putting big bets in electrification. And we have to think about electrification as you can't make the consumer buy what they don't want. This is always a difficult dilemma. So yes, a lot of money is being invested, but how many consumers are there today ready to buy an electric vehicle? A lot of things need to happen. Cost parity, infrastructure needs to be rolled out. You need to have the charging infrastructure, and you need to have the range. And the charging times have to be right. So all of these things are part of the infrastructure bill that was just passed. Is it enough? No, but it's a start. EVs are really changing the narrative. I remember well when I worked for Nissan for 25 years, and we were talking about Tesla, and every time we talked about Tesla, it got people really excited. And everybody said, they're not going to ever compete with us. They're never going to have a segment car like us. Well, their stock is amazing, and they've got some pretty good products that are selling pretty well globally. So it's completely upended the industry, and there are a lot more companies coming with great products. We saw Motor Trend's Car of the Year, the Lucid Air. I haven't driven it, I'd love to drive it, but this is a company that's yet to produce anything, but it's Motor Trend's Car of the Year. So we're seeing a huge shift. In the world of carbon footprint, COP26, lots of regulations are happening globally that are increasing the penetration of EVs. We're seeing some EV-only zones, no internal combustion engine vehicles allowed in certain areas around the world. Technology is improving by the day. Cost is coming down. The amount of precious metals we need, the efficiencies are going up. Battery research is moving rapidly. Again, it's not enough. When we look at what China is putting into research today, it's 8 times what we're putting into research in terms of dollars. So I loved hearing from the professor a moment ago, we need to give talented students more money. EVs are finally coming out in fun cars. We've got the F-150 Lightning, we've got the Rivian, we've got the Mach-E. It's no longer just somebody who wants to be green, let's say, with small vehicles that are not utility-based. We have so many more choices, and this will help that consumer appreciation, as I was talking about before. Wall Street is weighing in big time. I mentioned Tesla's stock price. We've seen several IPOs for startup electric vehicle companies that are just shocking the market. They're also rewarding companies for ESG, and many of them have announced firmly, many of the big brokerage firms say, we're not going to invest in you unless you meet these particular ISS guidelines and others. And for once, we are seeing the EV share increase unrelated to fuel prices. So we are seeing people purchasing EVs and not just on a pure, I'll just call it economics based on refueling. We have seen electric vehicles from 2020 to 2021 increase from 3.8% of sales to 8.8% of sales in 2021. Those numbers, though, unlike Biden's executive order, include hybrids, because in CAR's view, reducing the carbon footprint is good regardless. So we actually have quite a long way to go to reach Biden's goal. This is where we are today. I said we had a big increase in 2021, but you can see the numbers there. Then to get to 20%, which is where, honestly, at CAR, we felt we had a pretty good roadmap to get there. That's still a pretty steep curve. 50% is exponential. So there's a lot of additional effort that needs to go into reaching that. So we have a lot of things under negotiation now. We did pass the infrastructure bill, which has $5.7 billion for EV ferries, buses, school buses, and $4.7 billion for charging stations. Then there's the big Build Back Better, which is including the incentives for EVs, which is a very hotly debated topic. Being from Detroit in a union-based state, my view is a little bit different. I think any manufacturer that makes an EV deserves the same incentives because the environment just plain doesn't care. But beyond that, you know, there's a lot of things included in this Build Back Better bill. The incentives are needed. I mentioned earlier about the discrepancy in new vehicle price and household income. We need incentives. The world has shown it works. It worked in Norway, it worked in China. If we look at the incentives, it includes fuel cells, it includes 2- and 3-wheel EVs, and it also includes used cars, because there's no better bargain out there, at least a few years ago, than a used Leaf. But still, it's good, adequate transportation for a large amount of the population. 2, 3-wheel EVs, it's coming. When we think about a city, and a lot of people just driving a mile, which is a shame because they should be walking that mile, but if they're able, 2, 3-wheelers, small vehicles, personal pods, all of these new futuristic kinds of vehicles are truly needed. We don't know how to regulate them yet, but they're needed. There are limits on MSRP. If you can afford something over $85,000, duh, you probably don't need an incentive. And high-income buyers, again, you don't need to give money to people who can afford. The other thing they're doing is, right now they're saying imports do not qualify after 2026. That's a hotly debated item. And it includes some credit for public charging. There are many, many other pieces being negotiated. As you know, there's lots of things being added into this. So it'll be changed quite a bit if and when it passes through. One thing I wanted to add was yesterday it was strongly recommended for the CHIPS Act, which, as we know, the semiconductor industry is strangling the automotives, has been for some time. It's going to take time for it to solve itself. Probably we're going to see trouble for at least another year. And let's not forget about magnesium and several other critical materials that we are solely dependent on sources outside of this country. We need to fix our supply chain, which is also being discussed hotly in the government. So this is one of my slides. It only has a few words. When we look at the future, we need to have every kind of product for every kind of person working collaboratively on our streets safely. That's a big jump from where we are today. In most places where we say bikes are integrated with cars, it's still extremely dangerous because drivers, we don't train people to watch for pedestrians or bicyclists. That's just not what we do. I lived in Japan for 5 years, and I only had one lesson in driving there, and I drove everywhere there. But it was almost 6 hours of driving through neighborhoods with my instructor telling me, watch for bikes, watch for people, because they jump out everywhere. So I know I became a much more observant driver, but we don't train that way here because we don't think about sharing the road. But in the future, this is what we need to do. And you need to be able to pick the most efficient way to get from A to B, and you need to be able to choose, is it the cheapest, is it the healthiest, is it the least carbon footprint? Whatever way you need to be able to get from A to B should be there. And we need to be very concerned about persons with disabilities, be they cognitive or physical. They have to be part of this. People who have never been able to drive a vehicle will finally have mobility equity in the world of autonomous vehicles. We need to be able to thinking primarily of that population, not about convenience or all the other things we often talk about, but being able to provide mobility to those who have never had it. In this picture, you also see small little pods that are probably platooning, and then you see other sedans, buses, etc. But all of it needs to be connected so they know where everybody is. Eventually, we need to have it all automated to make it more safe and more efficient. But the key point here is adaptive. We often think of one solution and we're going to apply this everywhere. But everywhere has a different personality. So we need to start small, trial, learn, fail a lot, and keep adapting it till you get it right. And even then, as your demographics change, you still have to adapt it. When we look at R&D efforts that are currently happening, you see a lot of managed connected fleets. You have Voyage, Waymo, some of the leaders here, the Lyft Afted program, and they are connected and they are managed. And we're learning from them. This is how we get all of our data. This is how we do the artificial intelligence. This is how we do the algorithms. But we need to do a lot more and learn a lot more. Bus Rapid Transit is one great program. I didn't mention that I am a Michigan fan, but I did live in Columbus for 3 years, Columbus, Ohio. And while I was there, I led the Smart City Challenge. And one of the things that we did there was we put in Bus Rapid Transit. There are a number of people, and I'm sure I'm not telling anybody that's in a transit agency here anything new, but so many of the folks that work for minimum wage have to commute maybe 5 miles to get to work, and they may have to change buses 3 times, and it may take them an hour to an hour and a half. Bus Rapid Transit is an excellent way to be able to get people where they need to go using technology in a very efficient manner. Nothing is better than public transit. Then we also have personal rapid transit, automated shuttles. I know that there's a few companies here that have them, Local Motors and others. Most of them are still on dedicated tracks. Most of them are still in contained campuses, be it college campuses, senior living complexes, et cetera. But we're, again, learning a lot from these deployments and hopefully be able to do more with them. Now, one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about cognitive disabilities, and despite COVID, we're still living to be pretty old here. Most of us in the late baby boomer stage or early baby boomer stage are going to outlive our driver's license by 10 years. And I think most of us are still going to want to be able to get around, to go have coffee with friends, to visit relatives. So again, this mobility equity, it's not just a dollar issue, but it's also an age issue and the ability to be able to provide everyone equality. We're seeing a lot of great automated micro-delivery, and quite frankly, this is going to be one of the areas we're going to continue to see great breakthroughs. You're going to see a lot more autonomy in commercial trucking, in first mile, last mile, because simply we can't get enough people to do that today, and we have a huge boom that's not going to stop in terms of people's expectations to order and get things the next day. I mentioned earlier about adaptive. As engineers, we often have these great technological solutions and we go look for problems, and then we just find a problem and throw our technology out there. Rather than doing it the opposite way, please understand the problem and then let's utilize the right technology to solve that problem. And every community is different, and even within cities, you have different small communities that are different. Be it if they're urban, rural, the demographics, do you have an aging population? Do you have a younger population that doesn't want to buy cars anymore? They just want to use vehicles? Your climate makes a big difference. I mentioned the traffic jam I was in Saturday. Maybe if you watched the game, you saw the snow coming down throughout the whole game. So by the time we got out, there was probably 2-3 inches on the ground, icy because of all the cars. And a lot of technology has difficulty in those situations. So you see a lot of the technology being deployed now in the nice climate areas. That will change. Technology is improving. There are breakthroughs coming to help with those weather situations. But again, your solution depends on climate. Also, the culture of that community, that cannot be overlooked. And one of the smartest things we ever did when we did the Smart City work, we went in and started talking to the communities about what is your problem. And in a community that we intended to put autonomous shuttles in for healthcare, ended up their biggest problem was the fact that they didn't have broadband, and by the way, their cell phones, the only package they could afford ran out of data by about the 9th or 10th day of the month. So what's happening with regulations for automated vehicle deployment? This map is the latest that we have, and we try to stay, very up to date on it. And this is really the post-testing commercial deployment. This does not talk about those people who have said it's okay to test in our states. But as you see here, there's some variety. We have some that are actually, we don't have any addressing at all. We presume it's permitted. Then there are some that says explicitly allowed. Some have a good state approval reporting process. Some are just commercial vehicles. This next chart describes it very well. This is the different states and what they're doing. The definitions of autonomous vehicles, do they address testing? Do they address deployment? Is there local preemption, teleoperation, can you do call for studies, and do they permit platooning? There is one state that checks all the boxes, and that's the state that we're in today. Well done. And then there are other states, which I don't think are any big surprise, that where a lot of work is happening, like California, Nevada, Michigan, and others that also have taken a pretty strong outlook here. There are other states that predominantly haven't done anything. But when you think about an autonomous vehicle, guys, you can't change the brain based on state. We need to really have some good regulation that's applicable throughout the entire states, and we need to work together to make that happen. And NHTSA really needs to get a handle on it, and a lot of that research needs to be done at our universities with the dollars that are going to keep that talent here. Then this is what I want to end with, and we were talking about this slide last night at dinner, quite frankly. It's one of my favorites, not because it indicates promises made, promises missed, although it shows that, but that's not the point. When I mentioned earlier in 2015, we really thought by this point we'd have 25% of vehicles, or some people were saying 25% of the vehicles on our roadways by this time. Now, my view, if you've listened to any of my work, I said by 2050 we'd have a good penetration of autonomous vehicles, and I still think that might be right. But when we look at this, you can see all the things that were promised in 2018, 19, and 20. Quite frankly, none of them happened. None of them happened because they shouldn't have happened. They weren't ready to happen. The technology wasn't there. The safety systems weren't in place. And we need to get the rules and regulations, policies straight. Insurance, liability, rules of the road, right-of-ways, all of this needs to come into play. Now, we still have several things that are still talked about for 2021. Some have already fallen off. And then most people are backing out to 2023, and now we're even seeing 24, 25, because it's hard. Autonomous driving is hard. We will definitely see level 4, autonomous in a geofenced area. We see it now. That's going to continue to grow. We need to do more and more of that in persons with disability complexes, senior living complexes, things where people are really having a hard time getting around. Let's do it in these contained spaces and learn. And then let's gradually start to integrate it into human-driven vehicles. That's really, really challenging. When you think about all the unpredictable behaviors of humans, believe it or not, we're very unpredictable, and then try to create the brain that can handle all of those conditions. It's tough. And again, why we need more research happening in our universities and on our roadways. So with that being said, I thank you very much for your attention, and I think we're going to have a little chat.
Wherever you'd like to sit. I'm big on fireside chat, so let's face each other here, Carla.
Yeah, I was told we were supposed to sit in the middle. Yes. I follow direction well.
I don't. It's okay. First and foremost, thank you for that very amazing talk. I mean, you covered everything from end to end, from Build Back Better to what is the status of electrification, both from supporting it from a federal level all the way down. But one theme that I kept hearing across the board is that people are driving this change. They are driving it end to end, and it's not just the end user that is driving the change, it is also the worker who essentially will support the growth of this industry and what's going to be built for the future. And what good are the things that we create if they don't make our lives better, they don't make people's lives safer, and they don't reduce our carbon footprint? So for those in the room today, starting is always the hardest part, and you always need to lean in. So what would you tell those in the room today on how to start on this voyage, on this mission, to help us achieve that full autonomy in the future and electrification?
Yeah, that's a really loaded question. So I mentioned a little bit in the talk about, we tend to use technology and look for ways to apply it. And we really need to listen to people. What are their needs? What are their needs in terms of how they want to get around, how they want the vehicle to interact with them? I have a little fun fact. Today, 25% of the people buying a car don't drive it. But they all want to know if it connects with Apple, if it has Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So people's expectations from their car is changing drastically. So we need to be aware of what the consumer is driving and how we can better meet their needs. When it comes to electrification, we can't just tell people electrified vehicles are better. They need to experience it, and they need to feel comfortable they'll be able to charge them. I had a great story recently. I was talking with somebody from Boston, and he said, the people here have figured out how to manage it in multi-unit dwellings or in their townhouses in the city. I said, well, how's that? Well, they have an extension cord that goes from their house and crosses the sidewalk. This is untenable. Right. So when we think about electrification, first we have to think about what are the demographics that are most likely to utilize an electric vehicle. And if you think about it, those in the city are most likely, because they do the small trips, short trips, sweet zone for an EV. The battery just loves that stop and start. So, but they're also the ones living in housing, multi-unit dwellings that we have no charging infrastructure for. So you got to get rid of some of these hurdles to allow people to change their thinking, that this vehicle could perhaps fit in my life. The other thing is, assuming that people are going to buy an electric vehicle is the wrong path. So incentives are great for people who can afford them. But a lot of people don't want to buy a vehicle. They want to just be able to use a vehicle when they need it. So if we think about how to redesign our urban centers and our multi-unit dwellings such that maybe that entire bottom floor becomes a mobility hub where you just have, vehicles on demand for people to utilize with charging available there, or heck, somewhere far away, and you just bring the vehicles in. We have to be very creative about the different things that we can do and not be stuck with, we have a parking garage. How can I completely retrofit to put in EV charging? You can't. No. It's too expensive. You can't make it happen. But what can you do creative that allows people to be able to get where they need to be seamlessly and at a price they can afford?
What's interesting is that we actually need to meet consumers where they are now. We're just catching up to what they want, right?
Absolutely. And we have seen, a downturn in ride sharing with COVID, but in many other countries around the world, public transit and ride sharing are back up to what they were before. I know China was before Omicron, or however it's Omicron. We have to see how that impacts. But quite frankly, a lot of our youth today, they're really doubting buying anything. And a car especially is almost untenable or unaffordable.
It's almost in line. You've been quoted as saying we're moving away from vehicle ownership to usership. And this is really creating a shift in the automotive industry, because now they're segmenting their company into two buckets.
Oh, yeah,
so
let's
talk
about that. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Many of the legacy OEMs are now spinning off. Okay, we're going to do GM Cruise. We've got Ford with Argo AI. We've got the Ford Mobility Group, which is separate down in Corktown, apart from the machine. The machine is what's driving the money that allows all these investments to happen. So if you talk to people in the machine, they're going to say, we're the ones doing everything. We're driving the profits. But that's the folks that are designing vehicles, testing vehicles, manufacturing vehicles, and getting them out the door. It's the same old way we've always done things. The consumer in the future isn't going to wait for minor model change. They're not going to wait 5 years for a full model change. I want this change as fast as I get it on my electronic devices. So this rapidity of the old machine is going to speed up to match that of the new company. Now, how the culture can change and how you can merge those back together is going to be a big test. And some will get it and some won't. And it'll be interesting to see if the old entity, or if the new entity becomes the old entity, so to speak, and becomes the main breadwinner. And then what's going to happen with the legacy? Is it going to eventually just go away, or will they be combined again? Part of the reason of spinning it out, too, was for innovation. If you look at the OEMs and all the practices and policies and standards that are followed in a product development cycle, it's very rigid. Innovation completely disrupts that. And in general, we kind of kill it in the meat grinder. You know, oh gosh, by this stage, you don't have it figured out, psh, it's out. Now you go to Tesla, and they'll tell you completely differently. The idea is in, and it's in, and we're going to make it happen. I don't care what, it's going to be part of the product. Totally different way of thinking. And this new way of thinking, that culture of the company, has to be revised completely to be able to react and to manage this new customer expectation.
And that expectation also relates to relatability for the customer, right? We were talking a little bit about not only do automotive makers have to shift how they do things, but also how they relate their products to the people. Oh. They don't relate to the type of vehicle they drive now, they relate to an experience. So can you talk about the shift that also needs to happen with brand identity and how companies start positioning themselves with the public?
So this is my favorite question I ask OEs, what's your new brand identity? Because your old brand identity is passé. The power of driving, vroom, vroom.
Exactly, doesn't make sense.
This is just ridiculous. That's not even how you drive anymore. You know, the last time I really had a ball driving was, well, first of all, it was probably on a proving ground, but after that, it was way out in the middle of nowhere in northern Michigan where you can actually have fun on curves. Otherwise, driving is drudgery. And so the consumer, being it's drudgery, you know, they're looking for entertainment, they're looking for other things to do, they're on the phone, they're living their life, they're ordering things. So when you think about how to integrate what they want into that package and to be able to do it safely before AVs, it's going to be really interesting. Much more voice recognition, and voice recognition that works for women as well as it does for men.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, Siri, or I should say Alexa, can always understand my husband, but she understands me about 50, maybe 75% of the time. I think she just doesn't like me. But no, there is a difference in the cadence of our voice and the pitch, and it's been proven. Voice recognition is designed by men and understands men. Sorry. But no, we have to really look at this and how to integrate your life into your vehicle. So your car should know if you have to pick up your kids from daycare. Your car eventually will know what your refrigerator's short of and will tell you where that product's on sale and you can order it and blah, blah, blah. So making your life simple, seamless, integrated, and a way to do that easy is going to be the key.
You know, you use the word that I was just about to say, the seamless connectivity. Whether you're in your house, going into your vehicle, it should be one app. It should be one platform that you use, whether it's in your house, going into your car, or quite frankly, going onto and utilizing the transportation network.
Right.
So we have a great opportunity here, but it's so much easier said than done, right?
It really is, because if you look at most cities, they have very old, striated IT systems. So making one app, making all those systems connect, and then allowing even your private companies like your Limes and your Ubers and your Lyfts to share the data, to be part of that. You should have one app to get from A to B, regardless where you want to go, and you should have one common payment. You shouldn't have to pay them all separately.
One thing I do want to go back to that you had mentioned, start small. Always start small to do the right thing, because there's nothing worse than trying to go big and then not hitting the mark. So piloting is incredibly important, right? Goes back to testing. What are some of the things you would tell those in the room today on how to start small and then apply those best practices and lessons learned to go bigger and enhance some of the baseline that you've already created?
Yeah, I think the key is really utilizing public-private partnerships much more than we have in the past. Whatever community you decide to work with, have good dialogue with that community. Talk to the citizens, talk to the mayor, see where the problems are, and which problem they feel like they really need to fix first. Hone in on that one problem. Maybe it's just one underserved part of their community. Maybe it's something to do with the seniors' lack of mobility. There's lack of health care. There's so many areas. But hone in on that one and then say, how can we help? How can mobility help? And it might be a delivery service. It might be moving the people to a grocery store or moving them to a healthcare facility. Try it. Start with something. Hear what their problem is and say, well, maybe it's a shared ride. Maybe we need to change our public transit and put in a shuttle on demand in this area that just goes from here to the local hospital. There's many different things, but start, try it, and don't be afraid to change it. And listen to the people using it, because they're the ones who are going to tell you they'll tell you right away if it doesn't work, but they'll also tell you what's good and what they appreciate, and take those things you've learned and continue to build on those, and maybe then expand it to other areas that might have a different personality in that community.
Now, identifying those needs is critically important to make sure you're actually solving a problem and not dispersing and using technology just for the sake of saying that you're doing it. But the other part of that equation is always funding. Funding is always a challenge. Everybody says, I want to do it. I know this is something we need. I know this is coming, but funding is always the big elephant in the room. Can you talk about some of the innovative funding strategies you have seen in your travels around the country and the world, and how they're funding it beyond the traditional grant process?
Yeah, the grant process is one way. And it's one of the better ways. The other is through public-private partnerships. I'll go back to Columbus again, because this is one of the greatest examples. By the time we applied for the Smart City Challenge, which was $50 million, we had $95 million committed by businesses in the community to either invest in EVs, EV infrastructure, or some other kind of monetary support. By the time the program started, we had almost 500 million qualified. But it starts there. They've had a great way of working in that city for a long time. They have all of the heads of the largest businesses that get together on a regular basis to talk about how can we make the city better. And it's not so much a conversation about dollars as it is, if we do this, this will bring more business, this will bring more residents. So the economics, it's not a typical economic equation, because you've got intrinsic and extrinsic values, and how you value the different aspects of that, and then just the plain sustainability of your city. Do you have a long-term future-proof plan? And you have to add that in as well, and sometimes it's investment now, it may not pay off for a while.
And last question here, a call to action to those in the room. We're all motivated, we're all informed now. What's one thing you want everybody to leave this room with today to put plans into motion to help us achieve some of those objectives you had outlined?
So I strongly think we need to have more research. We need to have more research in this country, battery research, autonomous vehicle, artificial intelligence. We need to grow the talent. Make sure that you're getting good talent, you're keeping that talent, you're growing that talent, because we have a serious shortage. I think we all know the workforce is struggling today. So really support academia, get out there and encourage a young person to want to be in the transportation business, and that would be my big ask today. Just get out and get young people excited about the automotive world and transit world.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Carla Balo.
Please welcome your moderator for our next session, co-chair of Local Motors, John Rogers.
Good morning, and thank you. I would like to be joined by my three esteemed panelists because we're going to shift the discussion today. So if I could invite Katie Milaccio, and then let's see over there, I can see Scott Burden coming on, and Egino Caffiero. So if you could come and join me on stage, that would be great. All right, while we're getting settled, I'll do a short introduction, and then we're going to hear from each of our panelists. And I'd like to give a shout out today to each one of you in the audience to put together your questions, because we're going to shift the discussion today to agriculture, and we're going to have a focused time to talk about food supply and agriculture in this country and what it means when we think about automated vehicles. And you have three people here who could answer really detailed questions for you about what automated vehicle policy and technology means when it comes to agriculture. So as we get going, I'll introduce our three panelists, and we will then be able to hear individually from them before your questions come online. So Dr. Katie Milaccio is the professor and chair of agricultural engineering at the University of Florida. And she joins us today to talk about some of the things that are in her research and those that are going on at the university, and then to engage in the discussion. Egino Caffiero is the CEO of Bear Flag Robotics. He's joining us from the great state of California, so we're happy to have him here in Florida today, and we'll get to hear from him and the efforts that are going on. And on the far right, Scott Burden is the Director of Precision Agriculture at U.S. Sugar. Obviously an important commodity. And Scott's work is going to help inform the conversation. So before we get going in the presentation, just to scene set a little bit about what's going on in America today as far as agriculture is concerned. For those of you that don't know, we're in a period of great change over the century and over the last 25 years. Over the century, we've gone from 80% of the United States workforce being employed in agriculture to now less than really 10%. And if we're looking at direct agriculture jobs, it's less than 2%. So we have a massive shift in decreasing input from a point of view of labor, and that means actually labor workers and operational workers on a farm. And then the other major input is we have a lot less land that's being used for agriculture. So what does it mean when you have inputs that are decreasing, and yet you have more people to feed? We have 320 million Americans out there. We need to be more efficient. And so food science and robotics and other forms of technology are allowing farms to be more efficient in the United States, and that's obviously contributes to the bottom line of equity and sustainability and availability, which eventually means low prices for good food. If we don't keep that going, there could be a lot of other things that we care about in the US, including transportation, but it's one of those incredibly important things in the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is we need to be able to feed our people. And so today, we're going to hear from people who can help us think about that and how we apply automated vehicle policy and robotics and other forms of engineering to the agricultural industry. And with that, I'm going to turn it over, and we'll go, why don't we go from, Katie, I'm going to put you on the spot. Or you want to lead off here? Okay, we've got Egino's slides teed up. So Egino, you have drawn the short straw. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Egino, hear from him before we go on, please.
Thank you, Jay. Pleasure to be here. thank you so much for hosting us. It's a thrill to be speaking with this audience. I don't know if the slides will come up, but I don't really need them at all. I'm Eugenio Cafiero. I'm the CEO of Bear Flag Robotics. We were recently acquired by John Deere, which is a wonderful moment in our company's history. But outside of that, we develop autonomous technology for farm tractors. And so what that means is that we, previously and still have no intention of building the actual machines themselves. The OEMs do a fantastic job at that. This is a industry that has been maturing over the last 100 years, delivering value to growers. And so, we took it as our mission to how can we increase productivity and lower the cost of growing food on farms. And that's exactly what we do. Specifically to Jay's point, there's this myth in agriculture that the labor force is abundant, and if someone were to leave the farm or walk off or even just simply retire, there's this long line of folks just ready to go, and that couldn't be further from the truth, right? So the dependable machine operators, folks that understand the operation, that are easy on equipment, that are dependable, that show up on time, are some of the most valuable employees on the farm. And when they leave, that is the existential threat, right? Urbanization continues to happen. There are higher paying, easier jobs in cities. And I can personally attest that driving a tractor is hard work. It's hard on your body. 100-degree heat throughout the summer in the Central Valley of California is going to be hard on anyone. And so what we aim to do, what we endeavor to do, is deliver value back to growers by helping them increase their productivity. We can bop through slides pretty quickly, but we'll move on to a conversation here. But I assume this audience is fluent in autonomous technology, and so I'll just explain a little bit about our vertical and how we approach it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we started the company in 2017 in my garage. I came to the industry of agriculture through my in-laws, who are in construction aggregate mining. They own a construction aggregate quarry in rural Oregon, and they own the land, they own the equipment. It's a tight ship. They just can't find labor at wages that make sense for their operation. And so as I was spending time with them and learning more about their operation, we started, thank you, Jay. We started realizing that we could have impact in so many other ways, right? And so we started developing this thesis around how to deliver value on farms. And you can see here on the left is our first very modest prototype, a Kawasaki Mule. We still have this at the garage. And then very quickly, through the last 5 years, developed the product to what it looks like today. Basically, at a very high level, the technology attaches to tractors. This is the LiDARs, the cameras, the sensors, and those connect to the internet to deliver autonomy to growers. Our focus right now is on unmanned tillage. Among other prolific customers, we've been working with U.S. Sugar, most recently this fall. We're deployed at farms. There are autonomous tractors running today in the United States, in California, Arizona, and more recently in Indiana and Florida as well. Whoops, that didn't pop anyway. We put a roof rack on the tractor that has a LiDAR. You can see that in the front. We were previously using Waymo honeycomb LiDARs. That dried up. Waymo decided to discontinue selling them, but there's others as well. And then we use a radar on the front of the machine, as well as the compute in the cab. So as I wrap it up here, tractors are the workhorse of the farm. They are the jackknife. If you think about everything that happens on a farm, from spring tillage to planting to chemical application to harvest to fall tillage, that's all done behind a tractor. And so we can add value nearly year round. Places in California, in Salinas Valley, heck, they'll do 70 passes a year across that field. Now, that's less in the Midwest, but if you look at a place like Florida, that also applies. And so the value we can deliver throughout the year is significant. And this is just our web interface. So much of what we do is about delivering the value to growers. How can we make this easy? How can we make it like falling out of bed for them? And so we have to make it intuitive, just like no instructions, right? We don't have an instruction manual for the interface. You load it up and you should be able to click through and understand how to operate your autonomous fleet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugenio. And so we're going to move on now, and you'll pass the wand over. I think, who do we have? Whose slides do we have up next? Scott's? Okay, there we go. So we're going to do Katie.
Hello. Yes, it is. Thanks for having me here. I'm Katie Miliaccio. I'm from the University of Florida. We have a very large initiative going on at the university you've probably heard of or hopefully heard of regarding AI. And so I'm here representing IFAS, which is the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, and the efforts we have in that process. The work that we've been doing at the university really focused on two different types of automation. One that we just heard about, which is more the physical processes. But we also have decision-making that we focus a lot on. Examples might be spraying, looking at how we can use our resources better. An earlier speaker talked about thinking about carbon footprints, thinking about what we're putting into a system, what we're getting out of a system. And agriculture is doing the exact same thing. So it's very similar to some of the conversations happening in the transportation industry, where we're trying to use our inputs wisely. We're trying to reduce waste and figure out ways to reduce the amount of labor and different chemicals we're putting into the system. And here's one example where they're targeting weeds with specific herbicides. Another example is thinking about harvest. In Florida, we have 300 commodities, and that is a lot. And we're trying to manage when we harvest these commodities, how they get to market. A lot of it is fresh produce, so timing is everything. So being able to predict when we need to have people or trucks or different other processes in place in the field is critical. And here you see, this is a robot that goes through the field. It takes images, and based on flowers, it can predict when we need to harvest. And this is for strawberries. Another very important part of agriculture and automation is breeding. The systems that we are putting into place now are very different than how we grew things in the past. We have the ability to grow plants that work better with the systems we're in. For example, if we're in a controlled environment, how that plant is shaped is very important to how we can automatically pick the fruit off that plant. And so using breeding and AI and looking at these different traits, we can plan for the future and the kind of plants we're going to have. UAVs are very important for agriculture. We've been using them a long time. Some cameras, like you had mentioned earlier, looking at how we can collect data much more quickly, much more thoroughly, and provide better information to the growers. It's very hard to have someone walk through every row of the field and collect this information when you can have a UAV do it very quickly. And so there's a lot of work going on how to transfer that information into easy, usable information. Very similar. I'm surprised you don't have a manual. That's pretty awesome. I think we have manuals. But that's the idea. It needs to be easy and usable. So probably you've heard of Crew Robotics. This is a company that is Florida-based, and they are working on the strawberry harvester. As mentioned earlier, labor is a huge issue in Florida as well as other places in the United States, and so having these automatic harvesters will be critical to agriculture's future. Here's just a few different examples of other companies that are looking at horticulture crops, which is important for Florida, which is really different than some of the corn, wheat, soybean, and other crops that are grown in other parts of the United States, because of the idea that you're picking fruit or vegetables often for fresh market, which is different and has different characteristics that have to be considered, as well as you're picking a lot of different types of commodities. So you want to develop something that maybe can move from commodity to commodity. So I mentioned earlier the Artificial Intelligence or AI initiative at UF. This is a huge initiative going on at the university. We recently received a gift from NVIDIA that helped to inspire this initiative. We have the nation's fastest supercomputer in higher education. We're hiring 100 faculty to work in AI. We're looking at educating our workforce in terms of our students, our staff, as well as those out in the field in Florida, so that they can understand AI and the benefits it might have for them in agriculture, as well as other industries across the state. For our college, we have hired 13 new faculty. We're very excited to have them. They're joining faculty that have been doing AI for a long time. So I don't want to make it sound like this wasn't already happening, but it's bringing a greater emphasis to that area at the university and creating some really strong interdisciplinary possibilities we didn't have before. So one of the reasons that AI is really important for us at the University of Florida and IFAS has to do with the situation we have with Florida agriculture. And as has been mentioned, labor is one of those huge issues. We don't see that changing, so we need to figure out ways to deal with that situation. If you do live in Florida, you probably also know we have a very large problem with invasive species. They come in all the time. They're not predictable. Well, I don't know. If you can predict crashes, as we saw earlier, maybe they are predictable. But we have to plan for this, and AI offers a huge opportunity to really identify these anomalies that come in and deal with them in an efficient manner. We compete with many other markets here, and so we have to be on our game to stay competitive. We need to find better solutions to use less resources. If you are from here, you've heard about the algal blooms. You've heard about some of the wonderful resources we have in this state, the estuaries, the Everglades, all these things that we value, want to protect. The other thing that we haven't talked a lot about is it also offers an opportunity to reduce injuries on the farm. There are still many injuries on farm. Agriculture is a dangerous profession, so this offers us an opportunity to reduce those injuries. To create new markets and flow paths, if we can determine where we're going to harvest a crop, what the quality of that food might be, and what type of market would accept that quality, what a great way to reduce waste in our systems, and adapt and be resilient to change. I think COVID has all taught us that we have room to grow in that area. Lastly, if you feel inspired to learn more about what's going on in AI and IFAS, we do have a website, and you can see it here. Dr. Yannis Ampetzidis is prominently displayed. He does a lot of work with UAVs in the state, so I think that'll do it for me.
Thank you, Katie. Scott, over to you, and just a paid political announcement. He's the third of three, and then we're going to turn questions over to you. So get them ready.
All right. I just want to say it's an extreme pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be here with UF representing. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Yannis and have several discussions. So I think our universities in Florida, one, they're awesome, and two, we're very proud and thankful to be able to work with y'all and other universities as well. And the same way with the government of Florida, kind of opening things up or being forward thinking as far as allowing autonomous vehicles to start to operate in the state, maybe even sooner than some of the other ones. I think, I don't know how to get started here on the slide. So I think us as a company that's wanting to use a lot of these products and like the speaker spoke earlier is, we do want to try and we do want to fail. Don't want to fail, but we're going to, right? So we want to get out there early. We know it's not perfected yet, but any opportunity we have to test, experiment in our environment, as Gino indicated earlier, we started doing some work together at the beginning of our tillage season this year, and they've learned a lot just by showing up in a different environment, different soil types and different just environmental issues environmental meaning Mother Nature, right? So like in our case, the whole geofence and being self-contained, that's where I think the government comes in as far as we feel like we have a pretty good safe place to operate. So even if a vehicle failed or did something it wasn't supposed to, one, it's got a geofence. We have about 20,000 of them, but they're also contained by physical features, which would be canals and ditches and roadways. So even if it escaped that fence, it can't get away too far. So we feel like it's a good place for us and as well as the manufacturers to work and collaborate together and try to figure this out as we go forward. Obviously, the way it looks today is not the way it's going to look in the future, but we're excited to be able to partner with different folks and find an opportunity to get there. So kind of one of the things I just want to say is there's a pathway toward autonomy, at least for us in agriculture, I think. It's been true of municipalities, cities, universities as well. Is a lot of other places are highly digitized, but agriculture's collected a lot of data over the years, but they haven't like managed it well, I would say. So especially like in Florida, where they're more commodity crop, or less grains and soybeans and corn. That's had a lot of R&D in it for many decades, many universities from many states over the years. So their pathway's been a little more straightforward. Like Kitty indicated earlier, there's many different crops in Florida, and all of them are kind of specialty. So it's not like it's a one-size-fits-all type deal. So to that end, about 10 years ago, we started a very large project, put in a huge amount of infrastructure, not knowing where we would end up, but knowing that we needed to get better from a digital perspective. So, for example, we have about 200,000 acres. We have the imaginary guidance lines that would indicate where our rows of cane are and where they're not. We digitize all those boundaries to RTK GPS quality, have our own infrastructure of a RTK network and towers. So now we know, sub-inch repeatability, we can hit the same place at the same time. So our first pass through the field, we digitize that line and know where our cane was planted, and then we can push those lines and that data to all the subsequent operations. So if we're doing tillage or cultivation or harvesting, spraying, fertilization, all those type things, we now know well where the boundary's at. We also know, like our sprayers, for example, turn off at the boundary, or if it's already sprayed a certain portion of the field, it automatically knows to turn off that portion of the boom to not double spray it, things like that. So that's good for us, and that's good for the environment, and that's the right thing to do. So we, like I said, we've been kind of inching our way toward that. We don't have it perfected, but we are trying to get better and get more digital as we go, and that's kind of what this slide's depicting. So like I said earlier, we have our own RTK GPS network. We have our own LoRa network, which was in partnership with another university. So that's things like we have about 110 temperature sensors, rainfall sensors. We're looking at doing other things like water level, things like that. So we're definitely pushing toward the whole IoT side of the coin, which is a lot of data. We have our own Wi-Fi network. So like all of our tractors, for example, rural connectivity is still a problem. So in certain portions, doesn't matter who the carrier is. Gino's got to experience this with his machines. So that was another piece of infrastructure. We put in our own Wi-Fi network, making the best use of that asset, which would be that fixed tower that's out in the field that's expensive to erect. So on the data collection side, these days we're collecting well over 1 million points of data each day. A lot of our operation, at least on the harvest side, runs 24 hours a day. So we're getting into the AI space, doing things like predictability for like when's the right time to harvest a particular field, or when's the right time to plant it with the correct variety, things of that nature. We have a lot of historical data that you can use as training sets, so we're working our way through that as well. And then that takes us, all the way to the field level of trying to automate the machine, just like labor, right? We've heard that all morning, and I don't think that's going to change really no matter what any of us are doing. Transportation, public utility, it doesn't matter. I think labor is going to continue to be a tough one to get. So that's why we were pretty interested. But I also think there's kind of some quality pieces as well. We feel pretty strongly, like disking, for example, that Bear Flag is doing with us right now. It's so repeatable that it's not going to make a mistake that a human does. I'm pretty good at it, I think, until I push the button for the autopilot, right, to run that guidance system. And it just minimizes my wasted passes and the overlap and things like that. And we even feel from just a basic maintenance standpoint that our tractors and what the tractor's pulling will continue to get better, more reliable, and less stress on that equipment. It's not because people are doing it wrong intentionally, but you do something for 12 hours a day, you're going to make a mistake somewhere along the line. So that's the basics of it, I think. Some of the challenges we felt like us is, or for us, I'm sorry, is the mule, right, which is the tractor in our case, is extremely, extremely automated. From a John Deere tractor, for example, we get about 114 points of data about every 3 to 10 seconds, depending on what type of data that is. So it's extremely rich data. We knew about fuel burn and engine stress and temperatures, all this kind of stuff. But what the mule's pulling behind it is about the dumbest thing in the world. It's just a disc. It's a piece of iron. So I think the challenge for the industry, and that's why I'm excited that there's so many other segments of the industry that I hope ag can borrow some ideas from other folks, and as well as having the research space involved in things, is we got to get better on the actual work part of that process. So the mule's got to pull it through the field no matter what. But today we don't really know well, is the disc, does it have a bearing that's gone bad? Is there a rock stuck in between the blades, or is it plugged full of something, weeds and grass and stuff, so it's not doing a quality job? So, cameras help with some of that, but I think that's one that's going to continue to evolve. But that's why we got to do this and learn how to, scratch our head, get creative, and figure out how to analyze and collect this data a little better. So that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks. So now we've got another 10 minutes or so, 11 minutes to answer some of the questions that are out there. And believe it or not, I can just barely see you through the lights. You see us very well, but not. So if you have a question, raise your hand so that I can look for you, and then I'll yell it out and repeat it as we go forward. And if I haven't seen you, then try to stand up, and then I can get it. I'm going to start the questioning here when we think about it. You've heard labor a lot. And so we have both a researcher, a supplier, and a customer sitting in front of us today. And when you think about labor, let's talk about that. The direct content and the indirect content. Florida is in the top 20 of ag producers in the states, so to speak. And so it's up there. And you have the direct, the 2%, and then the indirect, the 10%. I'd like each of you to talk about what does robotics mean, and what do automated vehicles mean to both that direct content and the indirect content. Can we create more jobs? Are we going to make those jobs more efficient? What's the effect on labor if we're talking about it?
So that's one thing, like, when we first started these auto guidance systems in our tractors, is the first thing is like, they're all going to, half of us are getting fired. Everybody got worried, right? So there was that, just the people process of change management, right? So nobody got fired. What it actually allowed us to do, just by disking the right amount of acres per day, because we automated that process, still a human in the cab, but even if they weren't, we actually went and did other things that we didn't have the time to do before, right? Like picking rocks. As dumb as that sounds, right? It should sound pretty important, but, getting the cane planted, getting it cultivated, and the fertility applications, all that stuff was primary, but now it freed up more time. So we actually were able to do more work that we didn't have the time to do in the past. So that was one angle I don't think everybody fully understood, including, a lot of us. So I do think it has the potential to reduce jobs, or not even so much reduce, but shift, right? So just like we're not going to have 100 of these things without some babysitters, with technicians. It's actually going to increase probably the wage, because you're going to need more skilled people. And I think a lot of the folks that are on the farm have that farming mentality, can be moved toward that, higher tech piece of it.
Okay, Gino, I'm going to turn to you next to answer this. Just so everybody knows, 98% of farms are family-owned farms. Though there are lots of changes in the way that farms are put together in terms of cooperations and other, this is a family business. And farm income has the chance to surpass median income in this country for non-farm income. So it's a place to make money, and I think we should think about that as we're talking.
Yeah, without a doubt, just to pile on what Scott said, what we're fundamentally doing is increasing the productivity index of the existing workforce, right? So like the United States, an exporter of food, if we have any hopes of staying that way, we need to increase the amount of food that we're growing, food, fiber, fuel, that we're growing with less land and fewer people, right? And so, robotic solutions and biotech solutions and many other solutions will help us continue to do that. If you're Scott or another grower, imagine the value that one person driving one tractor now provides. That one person can oversee 2, 4, 8, 10 tractors. They can demand a higher wage for that service because they are more productive. And then to Scott's point, there's just so much dang work to do that no one's No one's kicking rocks, wondering what to do next. There's irrigation to fix. There's diseased crop to look after. There's machines to fix. There's always something to do. And so if we can alleviate the labor burden on this side, it actually increases productivity over here as well.
I agree with both of your summaries. Agriculture is hard, and some of the things that farmers need to do don't get done because of how many things there are to do. So one of the things I think that this will bring to agriculture as we do become more automated is it will bring new people to the workforce, because agriculture has really suffered from people being interested in going into that workforce. But seeing the technology, the opportunity, the innovation that's going into agriculture, I think will bring more bright minds and help us to do even a better job with producing food and creating the nutrition we need for the future. The other piece you asked about was kind of the indirect with transportation. I think that's critical. The movement of food in a way where it's not wasted, we really need to address. This is a huge problem. We have food wasted in the field. We have food wasted in transit. We have food wasted probably in our refrigerators right now at home. And how do we address that? And I think transportation is one of those solutions.
Well, in 04 and 05, DARPA made this industry a lot more rough because they said that they brought about the dawn of SLAM. So everybody had to think about simultaneous location and mapping, but now I see that agriculture has brought about the dawn of SLAP, simultaneous location and planting. So thank you. So it's a rough industry no matter where you look at it. We have mics out in the audience, and so let's take the first question. Over there.
Great presentations, by the way. A lot of great information. My question to you is, you mentioned earlier how, agriculture is a family-based business. What is the biggest roadblocks that you see to widespread automation of farms in this manner? And how can we advocate?
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, automation already exists heavily on farms, right? This is something that's been happening for the last 200 years. Obviously we could, last 6,000 years, but automation continues, right? And fully removing someone from the cab is a dramatic step in that, but really it's, not to take away from the excitement of that. It's one step in the evolution. As we look forward, I mean, listen, like taking someone out of the cab helps with the labor problem, but what we've always known is that labor is the wedge, right? We can get in, we can help growers with their problems today, but with these LiDARs, with these cameras, with these radars, the agronomic information that we're getting from these fields can then be used over years and decades to fuel increased productivity, to increase yields, to drive farming outcomes. So when we think of autonomous, specifically autonomy, I see it like one step in many steps of our evolution in farming.
I got the customer hat on, right? And this was spoke about earlier this morning too, as far as electric vehicles go. And I think it's true in ag is, at the end of the day, it's got to cost either equivalent of what we're doing today or less, right? So if it costs 6 times more, it's going to be pretty hard for us to widespread adopt that. And as you get toward more smaller family farms, that's even more important, right? So the average age of their fleets is probably going to be older, similar to like people with lower income with the average age of the car that they can afford, which may push them out of the EV side as well. So I think that's a big piece of it as well.
Sure. I mean, I agree. It's cost. Cost and knowledge, training people to appreciate what that brings to the farm and not be scared to think they're going to get fired, right? So a change in culture.
Other. Raise your hand. Am I missing somebody? Help me crowdsource it. Other questions? There we go.
Jay. Hello. There we go.
My question is for Ignio at the tractor company. You said that you require an internet connection for your tractors. What type of capabilities can you do on board the tractor for processing, and what do you require that internet connection for? Are you trying to centralize costs by using a server-based processing? Are you capable of doing it at the tractor level?
Yeah, fantastic question and thought here. So we do all of our decision making, path planning, guidance, perception, all the heavy commute happens at the edge on the tractor. The thing to call out here is, at some point in the future, we will have autonomous lights out farming, right? Where you just set it and forget it. It's the Roomba of, tillage or planting or whatever. Opinion me, we are many years away from that. And so what we've identified is there always needs to be a human brain attached to that operation. That person can be across the farm, across the country, across the world, but being able to log in, understand what's going on with that machine, like to Scott's point, right? Like discs break, tractors get bogged down, like all sorts of things happen outside of the autonomous stack in the real world. And so we need to have high connectivity to that machine. And so a lot of what we've done is being able to incorporate experts, farmers, folks familiar with that operation, give them the engineers that they need, to monitor that operation. That's why we need the connectivity.
We got time for one more question.
I've got the person, so hang on.
Okay.
Where did he go? Did he leave? No, it's okay. It's him that
There we go.
We hear so much about the chip shortage that's affecting the automobile industry. So is there a corresponding chip shortage that's on the agricultural automation side?
Yes. Yeah, I mean it's the same thing you would imagine, right? We don't have a secret supply chain backdoor. It's a challenge.
I'm going to make a statement on that too as we think about it. Global supply chains for agriculture are mimicked as global supply chains for autonomous vehicles and everything in them. And I think one of the things that we've seen as COVID has disintermediated those global supply chains is that America is not competitive in several of the areas where it ought be. And for the last 20 years, we've delighted in shipping low-cost, low wage rate businesses overseas for the benefit of shareholder value, and it's hurting us at this stage in the United States. So it's not just something to be solved once, it's something to be solved once and forever as we think about shareholder value and how we return those things. We have not had time to talk about so many things on stage, and I hope that you all inquire about agriculture. These three are going to be around today, and so they are worthy for this. Thanks, everyone, and we'll go ahead and kick it over to the next panel. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy a 15-minute break with the exhibitors. Our next session will begin promptly at 10:30. As a reminder, engineers, for you to receive your professional development hours, forms are in the back of the room at the end of each session. Please return them to the registration desk. Thank you.